You're listening to the Your Story Within podcast with Dr. Janine Bennett, a writing coach and author with 5 published books to her name and a few more in the works. Through this podcast, Dr. Bennett aims to help listeners tell their story within and shares all the industry secrets of self-publishing and book marketing. And now, here's your host, Dr. Janine Bennett.
And welcome to the Your Story Within podcast. Today we have Ari Shaffer, and I'm so excited to interview her. She's one of our awesome authors, and today she's going to tell us about a new book and just share some information with us. And so again, I'm excited to introduce Ari Shaffer. Ari, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm just excited to be here. I love talking about writing and the books, and hopefully people will get some good ideas as well. So, I had a couple of dreams growing up. One was to be a therapist, and one was to be a writer. And so I feel very lucky that I was able to do both of those things. And I've also worked with some just really great people with my writing. One of the things that I didn't even realize was how many doors it would open and how it really led me to, to more projects and really to getting to know myself. So, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, some of the stuff you're doing, that's how we got to know each other. I didn't even know you were an author until we had that little Zoom breakout session during one of our organizational meetings. So that was awesome. Mm-hmm. So I got to learn a little bit more about you and was so pleasantly surprised to find another author. So that was awesome. So tell me a little bit about your author journey. So have you always wanted to be an author?
I really have. And, one of the other pieces I wanted to bring in too is that I do career coaching with people that are dealing with neurodiverse issues and that are dealing with chronic illness and things like that, because I always wanted to be an author, but I also had really severe dyslexia as a little kid. And so from 3rd grade to 6th grade, they had no idea what to do with me because I couldn't tell time on the clock. I couldn't write. I couldn't communicate very well. So writing a novel has just been a really monumental thing for me, as well as being a therapist, because that was another hurdle to overcome. And so it's one of those things that I'm really proud of that I was able to do. The novel was a long time coming. I've done a lot of nonfiction writing, but the novel was something that was tough.
Yes. I haven't gone there yet. I'm in the process of writing one, and we talked about that before. But I stay on the nonfiction side. So kudos to you for taking the plunge and doing it. And I'm again excited to share, and I can't wait for you to tell the audience more about the book. But before we jump into that, so you said you started writing, of course, not professionally, when you were younger. Mm-hmm. And then, so how old were you when you did actually start writing nonfiction or anything?
Well, my first published work appeared in the Rochester Post-Bulletin in Minnesota when I was 11 years old. I wrote a letter to the editor, so I was an opinionated little person. So I did a lot of writing letters to the editor. I was involved in debate and theater when I was in high school and college. So all of those things really fed into the creative side of writing, as well as the nonfiction. I think one of my very first books that I would still like to finish this, although I think somebody else has done it, and that was as a little kid. I was probably about 10 years old, and I wanted to write a series of books, short stories, about how children in other countries lived. What did they eat? What was school like for them? Where did they sleep? What did they do on vacation? All of those things. And I was fascinated by that stuff as a little kid and wanted to write a book and several books really about that.
Oh, how fascinating. How fascinating. I remember as a child writing a book You remember you take paper and you staple it together.
Oh, yes.
And then, you have your pages, and it was a book,
Yes.
I want to say I was probably 8 or 9, and it was
Yep.
The Case of the Missing Peanut Butter. And it was a mystery, where did the peanut butter go? It turned out the dog ate it. But
It's always the dog.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah.
That's so great. And, one of the things that is really fascinating to me about storytelling, I think a lot of people feel like, well, I don't really have that much to say, or who would be interested in my story. And the fact is, I'm working on my genealogy. So looking back, I can look and I can see that, this ancestor moved from here to there, and they lived from this time to that time. What happened? Why did they move? Why did they marry who they married? How many children did they have? How did they feel? I want to know the stories. And so if anybody out there is looking at, I don't know, yes, you do have something to say. I mean, one of my favorite stories was written, I think it was probably my great-great-grandmother or something. And they had to move because I think her mother-in-law was dealing with an illness. And so they had to get into a warmer climate.
Okay.
So they took the covered wagon from Pennsylvania or Ohio, somewhere in that neck of the woods, and they went south. And her husband was like, there is no room in the wagon for your rolling pin. There's just no room for it. And this story is about her saying, oh, hell no, I am taking my rolling pin. And I think it may have even been from the rolling pin's point of view, which was a fascinating way to tell the story. It was like I was cut from the birch tree in the back, and I was molded, but it was just beautiful. And I'm sure at the time writing it, it was just an exercise in fun. But, those stories are gold.
Yeah. See, it's in your blood. Writing is in your blood.
It really is. It really is. I have a lot of ancestors that have written. Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I have 2 points on that. My grandmother used to make different pastries. She's French, and she was in Upper Michigan. So I'm a Youper by blood. Anyway, she came to visit me in Puerto Rico. I lived in Puerto Rico for 1 year, and I didn't have a rolling pin. So she's like, well, how am I going to make these biscuits without a rolling pin, Janine? And she was serious. So she said, well, okay. She was also raised as a farm girl, and you do what you have to do,
Right. You're inventive.
And she pulled out a ketchup bottle, the actual bottles.
Oh my goodness.
That is a rolling pin. So we still got that.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. So we still got the goods, but she's like,
I love
a rolling pin.
And see, that's right there. That's a great story. And we know also, I mean, it feeds into the career work that I do, because storytelling is really what people will remember. And whatever it is that you're doing, storytelling it's very important.
Well, and that's how, information was passed down over the years, was through story before it was ever even written. People shared, and it's sad because we've lost a lot of that, and I think that's why I gravitate to the author side, and probably, more specifically right now, the nonfiction side, because I'm documenting everything. In fact, you can see my books behind me, and my first book was really, it's a women's Bible study, but it's really a part memoir, because I take people through all the brokenness in my life, but then, I don't leave on the broken note. I talk about the restoration piece and whatnot, but it was also just a way to document, I went through all of that, and maybe it could help someone else,
Absolutely.
And then to follow up what you were talking about, genealogy, I hadn't really got into genealogy until recently. My husband was informed by one of his aunts. His aunt she's big into genealogy. She's retired, and she started researching, all of the family, and she didn't find anything really good on their side of the family. So she ended up looking at Hayden's dad's side of the family, and which was kind of odd because his parents have been divorced since he was 2 and he's going to be 50. So that was odd.
Sure.
His side. But, she was just trying to find good stuff about anybody that she knew. And his dad had always been a part of the family, even after the divorce. But anyway, so we discovered that his lineage goes all the way back to, we believe, we're still waiting on this one tidbit of information, Charlemagne.
Oh my goodness.
We did discover that he's a direct descendant of William Byrd. So we live here in Virginia. So I'm in Virginia Beach. And the land that the University William and Mary is built on was given to William and Mary by the Byrd family, by William Byrd. So we're like,
oh my gosh.
Wow, that's interesting. We also learned that 176,000 acres in Virginia was owned by William Byrd. And so all this fantastic information. So when you talk about stories, my mind immediately went to, well, that's a story.
It certainly is.
And taking it from even today's date, talking about, us as a couple researching all this history, like we just found out, there's so many different spins you could put on it. So anyway, it's just fascinating to find out. We also found out that he was a gambler and lost basically all of his money.
Oh my goodness.
At least that's what I understand. I don't want to offend anybody who's part of that family,
Yeah.
But,
yeah. No, we all have fascinating stories that are just incredible. And it makes me actually really sad that there are people out there that are like, nobody wants to hear this. No, I mean, was it Joseph Campbell? I can't remember, who said that that's what really sets us apart from all of the other sentient creatures on the planet is storytelling.
Yes, I believe you're correct. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, stories and everything. When everyday life, there's stories. They make sitcoms on stories, reality shows, comedians. I mean, everything. It's intertwined in everything that we do. Our history, our future, our present. It's and like you said, going back to the career side, you want to stand out. If you're an author who's also a job seeker right now, if you want to stand out in an interview, share a story. Keep it, professional, but share a story. They'll remember you.
Right.
Same with the resume,
Yeah.
The resume is, it's just your narrative put down on paper in a professional manner, but you got to do things to help you, help yourself stand out. So yes, story is in everything.
Yeah.
All right. So how often do you get to write? You're doing all these things. You're a practitioner. You're, career coach, counselor. I mean, all these things. How do you write? When do you find time?
I think, I was kind of reflecting on this question and I write every day. I think that a lot of people write every day without realizing it and read every day. I know that, since we've shifted over to so much being involved with social media, I mean, when we talk about, the lost art of storytelling, really, if you look at somebody's Instagram or their Facebook or that sort of thing, they're telling a story. It's just that we're doing it differently. So, of course, there's the social media side of things, but in terms of writing, I teach workshops. That's primarily what I do in my practice, so that I can reach a lot of people. And so I have a career explorers workshop, and I'm always adding little tidbits because I will find something on LinkedIn, or I'll get inspired, or I'll have a conference, or I'll read a book and add something. And so I'm doing that. And then I'm also writing blogs for other people, guest blogging and things of that nature. In terms of the really creative stuff, I love doing that. But to me, it's like making a quilt that you really care very deeply about, that you need to put a lot of reflection into each piece. It needs to be done when you're in the place to do it. It's almost like there's a sacredness to writing fiction for me. Nonfiction is important, and it informs people and it can educate. It's really, really a good form of communication. But the fiction, that's an art.
Yes, I will say that I think the biggest thing for me, the biggest struggle with the fiction side is having been in industries where they kind of beat the creativity out of you.
Right.
I was in the legal field. I was in government for years, and especially the military side of the government, where everything is bottom line up front and they don't want any fluff and just get to the point. Boom, 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 10 years of that. It really is, okay, I can put a little bit of flowery language in there to help set the scene.
Yes.
It really is. It's taken me a while. I said I started the fiction book. I'm at chapter 8. I have a long way to go, but it is harder to get that back. Boy, that's great grammar. Is there anything that you do to help set that creative flow going? Anything, to get you in the mood for that creative thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's music. I listen to music that, because my background is as a trauma therapist, I'm looking at the emotional state that I want to create in a chapter or through a story. And so then I think of what kind of music would I listen to that would evoke that within me. And I really allow myself to marinate in whatever that emotion is and really feel it and think of memories in my own life and think back to how I felt, and maybe even checking in with people and saying, today I'm feeling really melancholy and tell me about yours. So it's like I really want to evoke that emotion. And then I can write from there. So that's how I do it. I'm sure other people have other ideas, but for me, music is.
That is fantastic. I never took that approach or even thought to use music as a tool. Mm-hmm. And it's so true, because how many times when you're, you break up with that boyfriend and then you're listening to, songs like I Will Survive, things to really get you feeling, better, or put you in a different place, escape, whatever the situation may be. Music really does that. I never went there with writing, with writing.
And I think I Will Survive is a better song than what I used to listen to, which was I'm All Out of Love.
Right.
Talk about an angsty song. Oh my goodness.
Wow. What I use and have always used in all my writing, even nonfiction, I'm a very visual person. Mm-hmm. A lot of times I will design the cover art before I have one word written. I just have to. The visual drives me. Yes. And now I'm going to try with the music, because I want to see what the visual and the music together do. Because I'm also trying to, I'm learning how to do the book trailers now. So all the video production and all that. So boy, that's going to make a huge difference. Mm-hmm. Because I'm already seeing it with the book trailers. I'm taking some courses, and boy, it's exciting. You have a picture and then you add some music to it, changes the whole dynamic of it. So I'm going to try.
Right. Well, I had a wonderful designer for my book cover. And I could not believe the cover that he came up with. It's absolutely perfect for my book, because my book is about surviving multiple personality disorder. And one of the things I know we had talked about touching on this, my name is Aricia. My full name is Aricia. And so I have other books by that name, under that name. So I have some children's picture books that I've done and illustrated. Those were really fun. Other books that I've contributed to in the realms of parenting and business and for career seekers. Those are under Ari Shaffer. But this book is under Ari. And the reason is, for years, I wanted to write a book that destigmatized multiple personality disorder, because that was what I worked with when I was a therapist. And I'm so upset with the way that it's portrayed in the media. You know, that these are people that can barely function, and when they do, they're looking for people to murder. I mean, it's just there's just, I mean, you look at the movie. Yeah, well, I don't want to name names, but you know, all of the movies, there's tons of them and tons of storylines with multiples that are bonkers. And the clients that I worked with, I had a heart surgeon who was a multiple. I've had artists and lawyers and, you know, people in all walks of life, a lot of parents that were dealing with multiplicity. I even had a couple I worked with, and they were both diagnosed as multiples.
Wow.
So, you know, these are just, it's a very, it's a lot more common than people believe. And I wanted to write this book, but for probably 15 years, to be honest, I struggled trying to write it as the multiple. But it was very disjointed, because for people who are multiple, they've compartmentalized in order to survive through trauma.
Okay.
And so writing a book from that, it was incredibly confusing. The perspectives are different. Just like you and I could look at a spinner and we could have different stories about it. And that's the same way with people that are multiple, is that, you know, if you're talking with a 10-year-old alter versus an 80-year-old alter, they're going to have different perspectives. So, so then I was working with a client one day, and he was struggling with his wife dealing with a chronic illness. And I said, I can write this from the husband's perspective.
Yeah.
And he can be seeing all of it, and we can be experiencing it through his experience.
I love that. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And so I wrote the book, and I had a tremendous amount of help from an amazing editor and a great cover art designer. I also had an incredible audiobook narrator who's done a lot of acting. He's been in Psych. He's been in a lot of things. He's wonderful. But my editor looked at it and she said, you know, I think is there any way that we can kind of put your name on there in a way that is gender neutral, or that is more towards the masculine? Because otherwise it's going to be confusing when people read it, and it's written by a woman from a man's perspective. And so, so that's why this one is under Ari Shaffer. And it's funny now because I get all of this mail for Mr. Ari Shaffer.
Yeah.
Because it is kind of a man's name. So, so that's humorous, but yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I want to hear more about the book, but I actually want to take people to the book. So let me bring it up on the screen. And there, you should be able to see it now. Can you see it?
Yes.
Good.
Yep.
So friends, if you want to get Ari's book, Timeshare, or learn more about it just from a reading over it perspective, you can go here on Amazon. The cover art is so awesome. I do agree with you. Love it. Love it. All right, and I'm going to stop sharing for just a second because I want to put that up on the screen. So friends, you will be able to go back and see that. So there you go.
Yep.
That's how you can go straight to her author page on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Leave that there for a second. And then you said that you also have written other books under your formal name,
Right.
Aricia.
Yeah.
And so let's bring up your website, because you have that on your website called Books by Ari, correct?
I do.
Let's bring that up. And I'm going to take that down now. I'm proud of myself today with the technology stuff.
You're rocking it with the technology. That's great.
I love my podcast partner, and she did all my tech stuff. So
Good job. Yes.
All right, there we go. Can you see that?
Yes, I
Good.
can.
All right, friends, here is her website. Again, there's the book, but let's go in and look, see some other books. There's that one. Look, she's won awards. So proud of her. Okay, and then go here.
I think is there another?
There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Here we go.
And so here are some of the other books she's written.
Mm-hmm.
I'll scroll through just a little bit, but friends, I'll post the link so you can go check it out.
Yeah.
There you go. Awesome. Love it. Oh, I've seen, I've read books by Liz Curtis Hicks.
Yes.
Higgs. Get that out right.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. And if you go to the bottom of that page, there's a book that's called Who Parked the Car? And this was actually where the timeshare originated, because I was working with a lot of other therapists, and I had a number of them who said, you know, I've started working with this client, and after a couple of years, they've come in and they've now revealed that they're multiple or dissociative identity disorder is another name. And I don't want to transfer them to another therapist because we've already established trust, but this is not my field of expertise. What do I do? So I put together this booklet that goes through and has a number of questions to help therapists get started. So clients can get that book and they can bring it into therapy and work with their therapist while the therapist is, you know, kind of getting a little bit more information and more training if they want to go in that direction. And it can really help the clients. So the clients were then asking me, "Oh, this is great, but we want more of a story. We want our story told." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness." And so I wrote that book, oh my goodness, like 25 years ago. I wrote it when I was working as a therapist, and now I'm working as a coach. So Timeshare came out of that, and it's been great because I've been able to get a hold of some of the people that really liked Who Parked the Car with those exercises, and they've read the Timeshare, and they're like, "Yes, our story is being told." And it's.
I also noticed a little note about your books that other than Timeshare, you do illustrations, and you've illustrated your other books. Is that correct?
I did, and I am really, I don't know, being an artist is one of those things that does not come easily to me. And so the illustrations that I did for the children's books, what I did was I ripped up pieces of colored paper and designed pictures from that. And it was a really fun way to do it. For the Timeshare, it was tough because I wanted to include drawings of my different characters, of the different alters. And so I signed up for some really intensive art classes. And I was in private classes as well as group classes for about 9 months. And I worked really hard to be able to do portraits. Okay. And I included them in the book. That was probably one of the things that I'm most proud of, is that it really pushed me to learn how to do that.
Wow, that's impressive. I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
But you said you did have a designer for the actual cover.
I did.
And I love that because of the nature of the book, the content of the book, I love that the piano keys are not perfectly straight, like a piano.
Right.
I mean, I think that is so symbolic.
Yes.
It's so representative. Do you want
Absolutely.
to share a little bit more about the book for our audience?
Sure. So the book is really about the journey of healing of a woman who has multiple personality disorder. And it's about her husband working to try and help her. But what we don't know is that he's dealing with a lot of his own stuff under the surface. And so he's really struggling as well. And then there are just all of these mysteries throughout, like there's more of my main character's family that's involved, and yet it's a really strange kind of a shady situation, and we don't know what that's all about. And so there's all of these other pieces, and the husband's secrets are kind of revealed as we go through, as well as learning more about Sophie, who's our main character. But Sophie is fading away. Other alters are starting to take over more, and they don't all get along with her husband. So there's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of mystery. But really my goal was to destigmatize mental health issues and to help people to understand really what multiples go through in their day-to-day life, because I deal with some of those real issues.
Wow. It sounds like it has a bit of a mystery feel, a psychological thriller feel. I mean,
exactly.
How would you describe what it falls under from a, genre perspective?
Right. From a genre perspective, we've gone with psychological thriller.
Okay.
But it's not, the multiple is not stigmatized in order for us to get there. But it is a psychological thriller. And one of the things that my editor picked up as she was reading, she was like, oh my gosh, I want to know more about Sophie's family. Like, there's all these intricacies that are like, what is going on? That I don't explore in the book. I didn't have the space. It's a fairly big book. And so that's where my next project is coming in, and that's called The 316s. And it's a 4-volume series.
Wow.
About my main character's family, which is entirely fiction. I mean, it's like it's so fun to write, I have to say. I hope that my readers have as much fun with the 316s as I did. Very, very fun. Very much a mystery.
Okay. Now, for this particular book, is self-published? Did you have a company, traditionally published? What approach did you use for this book?
Right. Well, for this book, I self-published. And the reason that I self-published is because I felt like going through a traditional publisher, they would take a look at it and they would say, I don't like this cover, or, change your main character, or take this part out. And I felt very strongly that I wanted this story told the way that I told it. I wanted to kind of be in charge of, the cover, all of those sorts of things. But because I was not going through a traditional publisher, really when I was looking at the audience, I was kind of like, well, I think that it's going to be multiples and their families and therapists that are interested in this. I don't know if it'll go much beyond that. And then I entered it into a few contests, and I won both of the contests that I entered it in. And I was like, wow, that's kind of a pat on the back. And then all of the reviews have been really good. So I feel like it has a much wider audience than I originally anticipated, but I'm still glad that I went the self-publishing route.
I think so, my friend. I think that the audience is a bit bigger than you may have thought.
Right? Yeah.
Because as you know, it's I like psychological thrillers.
Yes.
it was piquing my interest. I don't really, other than what I see on TV, obviously.
Right.
I don't know anything really about multiples or the mental health side with regards to any of that.
Right.
But that psychological thriller piece has me interested, so I'm definitely checking it out. And so tell me, you also have an audiobook. So is it a male or a female?
Yes, Adam Riley read it, and he just knocked it out of the ballpark. He did a great job with it. Everybody that's listened to it has been, just really swept up. He really gets into it. And I mean, you believe that he is Steve. You really believe that he is the husband. He did an amazing job with it. It's also available in print on demand, I think is what they call it, where if you want to get a regular copy of a book you can hold in your hands on the beach, you can do that. And it's also on Kindle. So, if you're strapped for money, it's like, I think $4 or something to get it on Kindle. So you can do that as well.
So paperback, is it just paperback and hardback and ebook, or just paperback?
Just paperback.
Paperback and ebook. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. And then of course the audiobook. The audiobook would be good. So because it's psychological thriller, would you recommend that I listen to it while I'm walking by myself anywhere, or no?
It's not scary. The book is not scary so much as it is really a mystery. And you're like, I've talked with a number of people who they're reading it and they're like, "Oh, Steve, dude."
Yeah. Okay. All right.
It's like that more than,
Okay. Yeah. All right. Because I do listen to a lot of audiobooks, and it helps me walk longer. If it's a good book, I'm going to walk that extra mile or whatever.
I think they said this one is, I can't remember if it's 11 hours or 14 hours, but it'll get you on probably several walks.
Okay. So you already talked about, there's a spinoff from this book then.
Yes.
And you said, how many books did you say potentially? 4?
It's 4 volumes. Again, going into the genealogy, which has been fascinating to me. What this book takes a look at when we're talking about inspiration, my author mind goes down rabbit holes. So I was reading about one of my ancestors. I'm trying to think of his name right now. I can't remember his name right now. But he lived in England. And he came to America when he was 41. And there's talk about him being Quaker. So I started reading a little bit more about him. And I learned that he may have been in prison for being Quaker.
Okay.
We don't know. You know how these genealogy things are, where it's like you've kind of got to connect the dots and you're not sure if they're accurate.
Right.
And so piecing that together, I'm looking for more evidence about this, but we believe that he was in prison and that he was likely there because he was Quaker, because that was the prison and the time, right? And that he came to America and landed in a settlement where a lot of Quakers settled.
Okay.
So I want to learn more about his story, but he really inspired me because I started looking at writing this book, The 316s, and I'm like, I'm talking about how this whole family has just blown up. There's, the 316s, it's about a community that all lived together, and they had this great vision about how things were going to go, and things went sideways. Child Protective Services were pulled in, and all of these children were scattered like dandelion seeds all over the United States because they went with different foster families.
Okay.
So this story that I start with is about these children all trying to find one another again. As far as they're concerned, they were siblings with one another. that were split apart. So they're looking to connect with one another. But as they look at it too, they want to look into their history. They want to look back and say, what happened that we came to this place? What was this community really about? What was it like? And then they look back generations and they start looking at those stories and come into stories similar to the one that I just told you about my ancestor. And so, yeah, it's a story that is true for a lot of people living in America, because we're all immigrants.
Right.
And
right.
so, how did this start and why did this go sideways? And yeah, so there's a lot of little pieces and a lot of mystery to it.
So
and that's like 4 volumes.
Will it carry the psychological thriller piece to it, or?
It does, and it deals with some mental health stuff, because all of my main characters are dealing with mental health. So this particular one, my main character in the 316s is dealing with anxiety.
Okay. Which is very timely today.
Yes.
Very timely.
Yes. And very common. Yeah.
Yes, I didn't realize. I know a lot of people that deal with anxiety.
Yes.
I didn't realize it was as common as it is.
Very widespread. We call it the common cold of mental illness.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Really? Wow. Okay. Anything else you want to share with regards to any of the books that you've discussed? Or are you ready to share some tips with our audience?
Do you know, I feel like I'm being called to share a book that I didn't write, but a book that has an interesting story. So I want to share that, and then you can do with it what you will. So I was very, very fortunate to be able to attend a talk with Wayne Dyer. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yes. Yep.
And being in an audience where he was coming onto stage, you could feel, there's like this excited chatter, and then he walks on stage and this calm fell over the audience. It was a really strange thing to feel, because I've heard of that and I'm like, I don't know if that's a thing. That's a thing. It was pretty wild. So he was talking with us about the I am, was his talk was that day. And he said, well, let me back up. I attended when I was at kind of a low point in my life, and I was feeling like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't have the motivation. I don't have the strength. I was just, and we all get to that point at some time or another.
Especially writers, trying to write that book. We have a community, obviously, but yes. When you're writing, you're alone. You're doing it on your own, and you have doubts from potentially you hear doubts from family members potentially. You have your own doubts.
Absolutely.
That, we go through as writers. So
right.
Yeah, I get that.
So I was at this talk, and he said, I was really inspired by this little book, and it's called The Impersonal Life. And I wanted to share the story of it, because it really has inspired me and helped me through some difficult days. It was written by Anonymous, right? And it is a book about, true to Wayne Dyer, about getting to know ourselves, about knowing our hearts, our motivations, and really about connecting with God. And with recognizing the God in us and living that into the world. So it was written by Anonymous. And after Anonymous passed away, because this was written, let me see. Well, it says copyright 1941, but I think that it came out before that. I think it came out something like in 1916 or something. It came out a long time ago. But it was written by somebody, and after he passed away, his wife published it under his name.
Okay.
the reason it was published anonymously is because it was written by a Methodist minister.
Ah, okay.
And there's a lot of metaphysics in it. And he was concerned that those two didn't play well together, but I think that they do. This is the part that gave me chills. He told me who the author was. And it's John Benner. And we have a lot of Methodists in our family, and we have a lot of Benners in our family. So I haven't connected the dots. I don't know if this is my ancestor, but I feel like I've got a guardian angel watching over me as I write because of this. But it was fascinating to me that I had gone to Wayne Dyer for inspiration, and potentially he got inspiration from one of my ancestors.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to hear more on that as you dig deeper to find out if there is a connection.
Absolutely.
Connection. Yeah.
Yes. But now on to tips. Yes. I hope that I've shared some things through this that have inspired people to write, even if they feel like, oh my goodness, I'm not really a writer, or I don't have the talent, or whatever it is. There are proofreaders, there are copy editors, there are people that can help you. There are amazing resources like you, Janine. Janine has pointed me in the right direction more than once with my writing, so I really appreciate that. I think it's really just, use writing prompts. If you want to write, but you're not sure how to even start, use writing prompts. I use dreams. Those are my prompts that I use. That's what the Timeshare came out of. I had a nightmare one night and I woke up and I was like, oh, that's a book. And started writing, and then pulled on my experiences. So that, and the 316s as well. That was another dream that I had one night. And I'm like, holy cats, that's, what's 4 books? And it's tied into the Timeshare. It tells a little bit more of that story. So I think once you get started, you get on a roll, and you don't need to have hours and hours every day. If you're like, you know what, I don't have that much time. Take a note. I did that this morning. I was inspired by something that happened and I had a revelation and I wrote it down. Always keep your phone or a notebook or something around that you can write on, and then just expand on it. I think probably one of the biggest tips is tell your inner judge to just shut up.
Yes.
Because as you're writing, that happens where you're like, oh, what will so-and-so think? Or I don't know if the grammar's right, or this will never sell. It doesn't matter. Think about, how do you define success? For me, it was just publishing the book. If nobody read it, that was actually okay with me. I wanted to publish this book for my little self, for my 10-year-old self who was like, I want to publish a novel. So I did that. So define success for yourself. It's not about how many do you sell. It's something else. I don't know what it is for you, but it's something else. And that's really important so that you have that sense of success.
Well, those are great tips, Ari. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us about your books. I can't wait to dive into Timeshare. And I don't know, I think I might have to get the paper book and the audio. So I have the audio while I'm walking, and then I'm a reader. So definitely have to, I'm a page turner, so I got to turn pages.
Right. Well, and you have to see the pictures. The pictures are not on audio.
That's right. I forgot. That's right. Yeah. I'm going to have to get both. Yeah. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And I know the audience will too. And so we're going to have you on when the next book is done. Well,
there you go. There you go. I'm hoping fall of this year, but I've publicly said fall of next year. But if it's early, then that's great.
There you go. There you go. Well, all right. Thanks again, Ari. Have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.